Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Throne Talk podcast. I am your host, Micaiah Janae, and I'm honored to be your host. I'm honored to be able to be on this side of glory. I'm grateful to be a willing vessel for the Lord in such a urban, organic, authentic way. Um, and welcome. For those of you who are new, what is the Throne Talk podcast? The Throne Talk podcast is where I just give my queenly perspective on situations in life to help you all navigate through life. And not just you, myself as well, because life is hard. Life is definitely hard. So that's the Throne Talk podcast. It falls up under the Glory Throne Academy, which is the brand or it is the business that helps you individuals, helps individuals to pursue their purposes and callings in life intentionally and confidently. And I'm just so happy to be a visionary um, here on earth to do very purposeful work and to help people do purposeful work as well. All right, so before we get into what we're going to get into today, I need for all of you to, or if you haven't, I need for you to follow the Throne Talk or Glory Throne Academy pages on social media, on Facebook and Instagram. That is Glory Throne Academy, GLORYTHRONEACADEMY. That is Glory Throne Academy on Facebook and Instagram. And if you haven't, I need for you to share, like, subscribe, wherever you are watching this podcast from. I need for you to support as much as possible. If you can, please do that. It would, I don't even know. What's the grammatical term? Would where, it's going to be greatly appreciated. Just know that. I can't, let me just add this in here before we start talking. Like, grammar is difficult, especially when you come from the South and you talk and speak slang all the time. And it used to drive me nuts when I was competing in pageants because I just, for some reason, I hated articulating my words to sound super proper. When really I just need to say what I need to say and make sure that everybody can understand me. And sometimes I don't get the present tense, past tense words right. And you'll probably hear a few mistakes in this episode. You could definitely hear it in previous episodes. But, I'm just to the point now where it's like, do you understand what I'm saying? Do you get where I'm coming from? That's all I got for you. Like, that's just where I'm at with it. I've done my years of being so bent out of shape about not sounding perfect. Okay. Okay. So, we have one more episode left of this year. Yeah, it's almost 2024. October, where did October come from? That I'm really trying to figure out, where did it come from? Like, help me understand. I'm still, my mind is still technically in like June. I turned 29 in June, and in my head, I'm still like celebrating my birthday. I'm just like, next month is November. Make it make sense. With that being said, we only have one more episode left of this year. December, we are taking a break, and then January, we're gonna crank this baby back up. Okay. So be prepared for the best because the best is yet to come. I also want to give a disclaimer. I am very much in my living room. New setting. Who is this? Who this? New setting. And it's a beautiful, get into this beautiful, what is it? A couch. This living room set is phenomenal. I'm giving this disclaimer because I am in my living room and you may hear some noises in the background. I live with people, real humans who live real lives. So you're going to hear them make noises in the background. That's totally fine. And a choo-choo train. I think I've given that disclaimer a few times before on my podcast episodes, and it's really loud. So I need for you to try your best, your absolute best, to drown out the choo choo train in the background. They got to do what they got to do. They got to get where they need to get. And same for me. So same for me. So for about 30 seconds, just kind of like ignore it. It's going to get really loud at some point, but yeah, it's not going to stop anything. I'm not stopping them. They're not going to stop me. Okay, cool beans. One day I'll be out of this space where there's no choo-choo train right beside the place where I live. But right now, I appreciate where I am. And that's just that. All right, let's get into today's episode. Today's topic: to be or not to be. That is the question. I don't even think I was supposed to use a British accent for that, but get into it. To be or not to be, that is the question. I'm sure y'all have heard that quote before from the play Hamlet. Even if you haven't watched that play, like you've heard at some point in time, have heard that quote. Well, it's from a monologue, if I'm not mistaken, in the play Hamlet. But that first line or that little sentence right there has I've heard it for years since I was younger. To be or not to be. And today we're talking about being in your feelings. To be what, my kid? To be in your feelings or to not be in your feelings. When should you be in your feelings? To be or not to be? That is the question. When am I supposed to be in my feelings, my kid? And the subtopic is knowing when to be vulnerable, right? That is what we are talking about. And before I give the details about all of this, or how I came to choose this topic, I want to talk about the definition of vulnerability. And I'm going to grab my notebook for a second. So, the definition of vulnerability to me, how I perceive it, is when you take the time to discover why you feel the way you feel and articulating that discovery in a very raw and intentional way. I'm going to say it again. Vulnerability is when you take the time to discover why you feel the way you feel and articulating that discovery in a very raw and intentional way. One more time. Vulnerability is when you take the time to discover why you feel the way you feel and articulating that discovery in a very raw and intentional way. In a very raw and intentional way. Yeah. To be or not to be vulnerable. To be in your feelings. That is the question. The culture says, get out your feelings, get into a bag, or not get into a bag. Get in the bag, get out your feelings, get to the bag, get out your feelings. That is, I know Black culture for sure says that is a mindset that we have adopted recently, or probably within like the past 2 decades, maybe 10, maybe the past decade. I'm not gonna put a time to it, but just know this is a mentality that we have adopted so strongly recently. And I would like to think that it stems from, us not having the financial stability that we've always desired or know that we were meant to have. Right? There goes the choo-choo train. Going back to slavery, just feeling as though, financial freedom doesn't belong to us, but all we ever had was our raw feelings and emotions and experiences. All we ever did was feel. That's all we've ever done as Black people is feel. And so now it's just like, look, I think it comes from, look, we done did all the feeling that we could do. We want this money. Bump feelings. Bump feelings. Where's the money at? I think that's where the whole get to the bag and get out your feelings mindset I think that's where it stemmed from. And honestly, there's nothing wrong with getting to the bag. There's nothing wrong with, you know, seeking financial freedom because I want that for me. I want that for myself. But I think ultimately life is about balance. It's not about getting rid of one to pursue the other. I think it's about knowing when to do what, which is what we're talking about today. Knowing when to be in your feelings or when to be vulnerable. And let me just add that being in your feelings and having feelings about something is not always the same as vulnerability. It's not. I'm gonna say that again. Being in your feelings and having feelings about something is not always about like it that doesn't mean that you're necessarily being vulnerable because a child can come to you, right? And express their emotions and be in their feelings about something, or um let's just say you took their favorite toy from them or something like that, right? And you see that the emotion or the feelings that they're feeling is they're very upset, they're very angry. Having those feelings and emotions alone does not determine why they are feeling what they are feeling. Vulnerability is when that child is old enough to articulate or, equipped well enough to articulate. I don't like when you take my toy because my toy actually brings me a lot of joy. My toy helps me, this specific toy um, makes me, it helps me feel safe, or let's just say it's like a stuffed animal or something like that. And they're just like, my stuffed animal makes me feel safer. You know, being able to articulate why you feel the way you feel is vulnerability. I remember Pastor Tim Ross on his podcast episode, he was discussing that on the basement. He was just basically saying honesty enough, like just honesty is not, that's not enough. That's not being vulnerable, right? And we're going to get into some more examples, but I want to talk about why let's, vulnerability. I don't know. But why it's so necessary. Anytime you want to experience the pureness of something, anytime you want to experience the rawness of something, anytime you want to experience just the simple goodness of something, it's going to require vulnerability at all times. Point blank period. And if it hasn't reached a space where it's raw, is it really real? Is that the real thing? I think that's what we want ultimately as people. We want the real thing of everything. We don't want the knockoff. We don't want the copy of the real thing. We want the real thing. And anytime you want the real thing, specifically love, I know a lot of people say they want the real thing far as like love and relationships go. But if you want that, you have to be vulnerable at some point in time. You can't escape it. So this whole get out your feelings and get to the bag thing, know when to get to the bag, but also know when to get to your feelings, to address your feelings and figure out why you feel the way you feel, right? Yeah. So I want to talk about why vulnerability is necessary, but how it's not for every moment. And that's how I came to choose the topic of to be or not to be, because me, I'm naturally gifted with I've been gifted um with the gift of vulnerability. I have no problem doing it. It comes natural for me. I believe that's something that God has given me. And I know that is raw and I know that is real and I know that is a good thing, but it has tripped me up in a lot of situations. It has hindered me in a lot of situations because I didn't know when to be it. Like I've always been very aware of my feelings and why I feel the way I feel. But when it came down to expressing those emotions or expressing the root of those emotions, I oftentimes I would tell it to the wrong people, or I'm telling it at the wrong time, or I just didn't know where it belonged, you know? And now I'm just getting to the point, I'm getting into the space where it's like you have to be intentional about how you're being vulnerable. When I was looking at the Know For Sure podcast, with uh B Simone, Megan Ashley, and the guest was Jackie Hill Perry. They were talking about how you have it's necessary, but not for every moment. And so because it's who I am, because it's a God given gift, I just thought I could do it all the time. And it's like, no, you have to learn when to be vulnerable. I want to give an example. So I usually give pageant examples for those of you who are new, but I remember when I was competing, each girl has to have a platform, something that she's very passionate about. And usually contestants choose something that is very like heart pulling, something that speaks to the heart, something that will move people's emotions. And a lot of girls would use someone dying, or like someone dying of cancer that they were close to, or something happening to their loved one, or them being sick, or somebody else being sick, or, the things that will really tug at your heart. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I can't remember who I was speaking to, but I was talking to them about my experiences, or I was talking about, living my life as the daughter of a drug addict, my father, to be exact. And even though they felt what I felt, right? Even though um they deeply felt my story and where I was coming from, I knew that giving people that level of intimacy about my life could destroy, um, could easily give them the avenue, or could easily open doors for them to capitalize off of my pain, as well as hinder my father from actually recovering if he wanted to recover. So they could easily put me in the um, category of a victim, and not even consider what he's going through. In that moment, I was like, I don't know, like, although this could help me win, although this could set me so far apart from you know other contestants, is this the vulnerability? Do they deserve to know this experience? Do they deserve, or can they handle who I am or my life outside of the glitz and the glam, the performing well, winning talent awards, and being Micaiah Murphy? Can they handle that? And the answer was no. And I remember I was talking to a former Miss South Carolina. I was saying to her, because she had someone to pass away in her family from cancer, and I was saying, look, don't allow them to capitalize off of your pain. Like, I could tell it was something that she was still deeply struggling with. And I said, don't allow them to just capitalize off of that, and you not actually consider what you've been through and what you've gone through to get to the space, and a space that you're still technically trying to get to. Right? So that's when I realized that vulnerability is necessary, but it's not for every moment. It was not meant for me to make it a platform. Point blank, period. Vulnerability, next point. It's not always what you want to hear. It's not. It's not always what you want to hear. So, going back to my situation with my father, when it came time for me and him to talk about, you know, how his actions have affected me, it was a very raw place. It was a very real place, but it wasn't pretty. It wasn't pretty at all. Or when it came down to the relationships that I was in, friendships and like romantic relationships, when it comes down to communicating with these people that you love, going back to what I said about when you want something real and raw, like such as your relationships, you have to communicate. And when people say communicate, 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 they think it's just you sitting down talking to this person and just telling them how you feel, or just, let's just talk to check it off the to-do list. No, it's very much you taking the time to do the individual work, discovering why, going back to what I said about, let me get my notebook, discovering why you feel the way you feel, and articulating that discovery in a very raw and intentional matter. In a very raw and intentional matter, talking to your people, the people that you love and care about like, if you've done something to me, why it made me feel like it made me feel this way. Getting into the space where you can actually articulate why you feel what you feel with the people that you love and care about. And it's not always pretty. It's just not. Sometimes you're going to have to hurt their feelings just to get to the truth. Sometimes you're going to have to hurt their feelings just to get to the truth, just to reveal the truth, just to have a relationship that's true. You're going to have to hurt some feelings sometimes. That's what vulnerability is. It's not always what you want to hear. It's not all. Matter of fact, 100, like 90% of the time, it's never what you want to hear, because as humans, we have this idea of who we think we are and who we think we are to people, until we actually discover that people are wired differently. People have gone through their own separate experiences from us, and they have their own conclusions and their own belief systems about things. And you don't know how they process life. And so when it's time for them to talk, you'll hear them better. But if you believe, I've been this to you, and in a lot of cases we have, right? If you know you've done things from the sincerity of your heart, or if you know that you've done things with good intentions, then yeah. But at the same time, how that person perceives, or how they receive, or how they process what's been given to them makes the difference. You don't speak for them. You don't know why. You don't know how they've digested the love that you've given them. You don't know how they have processed you being in their life. And you have to give them the space and opportunity to communicate that and express that. Y'all, I am preaching to myself. Like, just assuming that you know is very dangerous. Assuming that you know everything that a person feels because you've had your own previous experiences. Yeah, you have an idea, but you never know fully, for sure, 100%. Never. And like I said, going back to the point, it's not always what you want to hear. So it does break your heart sometimes when you're having these conversations with people and you thought you were this to them, and they're just like, no, actually, this made me feel I didn't like that. I remember this guy I was dating, or this guy I was with. He had came to support me at Miss South Carolina, and he was like, his place of vulnerability was, I came and supported you. I did so and so. Um, like this was his space of vulnerability. He was like, I brought you your gift for your birthday, all this other stuff. I brought you perfume, Victoria's Secret, and all this other stuff. And I felt his sincerity, right? But I had to be honest with him and say, I appreciate all of that. Like, that was one of the best birthdays ever. But if you would have communicated with me more, then you would know that Victoria's Secret makes me break out. Like, the body spray and the body lotion and stuff, I don't use it. He was like, and I was like, yeah. So sometimes, a lot of times, being vulnerable, you're not always going to want to hear what you want to hear, especially when you're having those conversations with the people that you love and care about. All right, point number 3, vulnerability takes work and grace. So we just discussed that, having conversations with the people that you love and care about, or a relationship that you want to genuinely care about, you have to communicate, right? But I feel that communication is irrelevant if you haven't done the individual work. Like, if you don't know, you can know the necessity of communication, but if you haven't submitted yourself to a space of vulnerability, or if you haven't reached a point of vulnerability within yourself, it's all in vain. I hate to tell you. There have been times where I know I've done the work. I've reached like the like, it can't get any like more real than this. Like, it can't be any more raw. This is like the truest part of who I am, and I'm expressing this to you, and I'm having a conversation with somebody who hasn't. Or I'm having a conversation with someone who admires my vulnerability, but they feel like they admire it, but at the same time looking at it as a weakness. Because it's just like, if I let you win too much, then this is going to fail, or this is not going to be good. And or you're looking at me and you're just like, oh, like, I got her, or taking full advantage of who I am in that moment because I'm being vulnerable. And you feel like that's how you'll get your, like, you'll get one up on me. And it's like, no, it takes work and it takes grace. It takes work within yourself. You have to do the work within yourself um to actually be effective in life. Not just with relationships, but in life. If you want to be effective, you have to reach a certain place within yourself, and you're not going to do that without being vulnerable with yourself. Like, there's no escaping it. There's certain things, there's certain certain shortcuts in life, right? That could get you there fast. But there's certain things, there's only one way. And to ultimately become a better you, you have to be vulnerable. There's no escaping it. And because it's such a tedious, because it's such a draining at times, because it's such a what's the word? Because it's such a heartfelt heaviness, it it makes you want to give up. Because the more you do work on yourself, the more you realize I'm not as put together as I thought. And it'll easily influence you to want to run away from yourself. But you have to embrace those parts of yourself as well, as much as you embrace the better parts of yourself. And you have to give yourself grace. It's like, I know I'm so good at these things, or at this, but I'm not so good at this. God doesn't reveal those parts of you to you to scare you. He doesn't. He reveals those parts to you, for your good. And you're going to need grace in the midst of it because it's dark and it's heavy, but it's necessary. All right, kings and queens of TTP, I want to take this time to announce that your girl, me, Mykea Janae, is making jingles now, baby, like Jamie Foxx. And that's on period. That's on Mary Had a Little Lamb, Jesus Sandals, and all the other things that we be saying. Like, I'm out here and I'm in the bag. But seriously, if you know someone or if you are someone looking for someone to create an intro song or theme song for your podcast or productions, then I'm the girl that you need to see. Because if you did not know, I produced the intro for this podcast and I had so much fun doing it. And I want to help other people bring their ideas to life as well. So if this is a service that you are serious about, then you can email me at bookmikeyajanee at gmail.com. That is bookmikeyajanee at gmail.com. All right, now back to the show. It is so necessary. So it takes work, but it takes a lot of grace, giving yourself grace. And as you are in it, and as you are constantly giving yourself grace and receiving grace from God, it'll allow you to give grace to others in this life. There's certain things now that I used to judge people for, and I used to be like, couldn't be me. Now, I'm just like, look, it could be any of us. I'm just so grateful for God's grace and mercy, and I'm so grateful that, I did choose better in the time that I did. But if I was dealt a separate or a different set of cards in life, would I have chosen better? I don't know. I'll never know. But I'm so grateful for the cards or the hand that I've been dealt. I'm so grateful for it because I'm just doing the best with what I know about my life. But if I was born in another situation, I don't know who I would be. If I wasn't born Mykea Black, a woman with a face like this or a body like, or to my mom, or I don't know who I would be. And so when you do the work and you reach those places of vulnerability within yourself, then it definitely allows you to extend grace to other people as well. Last point, vulnerability is one of the greatest superpowers. So, going back to the first point, vulnerability is necessary, but not for every moment. Vulnerability is not always what you want to hear. Vulnerability takes work and grace. Last point, vulnerability is one of the greatest superpowers. So going back to the get out your feelings, I'm telling you, I have won so many situations, so many battles, just by knowing when to be vulnerable and realizing that it reaches a place and it's way more effective than you operating out of ego and arrogance or feeling like you're the best thing that the best thing since sliced bread. I've won so many situations. I want to talk about I have shared a Facebook post and it was basically like tell me your experience with me or what you feel about me or something like that. And I usually don't do stuff like that, right? I could care less because, you feel what you feel. Who am I to change it, right? If that's how you feel about me. There was this one particular dude who I went to school with who was actually one of my classmates. And everybody else was just, glorifying me and saying how much they care for me, how much they love me, how grateful they are for me. And I'm just like, I'm taking it all in. But this particular person, he had a different experience. His experience was in 8th grade. I asked you for your number and you say you didn't have a telephone, or I asked you for your number again and you said you was dating somebody and I knew you wasn't. Either way, He lied. He said I lied. And more than likely, I probably did. And I don't remember the details, but I do remember turning him down, right? And I instantly, at first, I was just like, why would you put that out in the open? But I mean, everybody else put the good stuff out in the open. Why not? I mean, it's his truth, and that's how he, that's how he perceives me. Even though it was 8th grade, I was like, bruh, that's 8th grade. But then I'm just like, man, like, people, that was him being vulnerable in that moment publicly. I personally wouldn't have did it that way, because going back to knowing when to be vulnerable, but I think that moment was so necessary for the both of us. And I said, I apologize. I said, I apologize to you for that. At that time, I did not know how to just strictly tell you no. And I'm sorry that I lied to you. And, I hope that the little boy, blank, his name, can forgive me. I apologize sincerely. Notice I did not apologize for not giving him my number, because in that moment, I did not want to give you my number. I didn't. But me lying about it was wrong. And so I apologize for lying to you and not being truthful. And I hope the little boy, because I know, like, it had to be the little boy and you still speaking up, because this is something from 8th grade, right? I apologize. I hope the little boy in you can forgive me. I those weren't my intentions. And when I tell you, I think I think it threw him for a loop. Like, it just threw him for an absolute loop, because he couldn't believe that I was publicly apologizing. But I've reached a point in myself where I know I don't have it all together, and I know I've made some mistakes, and I won't even live long enough to know all the mistakes that I've made. But if it's ever been brought to my attention in that way, shape, or form, especially for Black men, because I know they don't express themselves enough, I wanted to take that time and opportunity to just publicly affirm him, because I didn't want him to feel shameful about it, and I didn't want him to still perceive me as that individual, and I did want him to know my intentions for that moment in time. Right? Now fast forward to about a couple weeks ago. Fast forward to a couple of weeks ago, we had our class reunion, and he was out there, and he asked me for my number again, and I said no. And I didn't explain why. I was just like, no, I don't have to explain, and I don't have to lie this time. How he handles that now is totally up to him, and I pray that God guides him on that, what he might perceive as rejection. He might not, because he was just kind of like, he was like, oh, okay. And he was still trying to talk to me afterwards. And I still was talking to him, like, because I want to be friendly. I want to be cordial, but I don't want to be your woman. Point blank, period. That's that. For whatever reason. No, I didn't explain myself. So being real with myself and saying, like, Mikey, you don't have to explain yourself. No. Like, absolute no. So I could have chosen to be vulnerable then, right? And being like, oh, because of that, that's none of your business. No. So being vulnerable has been one of the greatest superpowers, especially now, because I know how to use it. Like, it's done me so much good, more good than harm. Because, like I said, I know when and I know how to use it. All right, let's go to this notebook, because I wrote down a lot of notes and I want to get to them before we end this episode. So let's talk about vulnerability being necessary, but not for every moment. I just briefly want to talk about who to be vulnerable with. Wow. First, okay. We've discussed how to be vulnerable. You have to do the work on yourself, meaning you have to be still. You have to take moments of solidarity and discover why you feel the way you feel. You have to allow yourself to feel. So that's point number one. You have to know how to be vulnerable. You have to know when to be vulnerable. Like, is this the proper time? Is the timing right? Am I discerning that this is a good time to release this rawness? And then the third point is know where to be vulnerable and who to be vulnerable with, right? So I want to break down those points. Knowing how to be vulnerable, being still, reaching a place of solidarity within yourself, eliminating the distractions. Stop living life trying to escape all the time. Escape through the means of entertainment, through relationships, through eating all the time or your favorite thing to do. And like, you escaping from doing the work within yourself is always going to do you more harm than good. I can guarantee you that. I've done it before. I remember, I think I talked about this briefly on a previous episode where I had just got rejected by this guy. He stood me up on a date, and I remember feeling I was having a panic attack, literally. Did not know I was having a panic attack. Came home. Usually I'm not home by myself, but my mom and brother, they just so happened not to be home that day. I got to the door and I got to this hallway right here. In the middle of the hallway, I broke down, started crying. No noise was coming out, no tears coming out, just a loud, like a loud scream that had no noise. And I remember God saying to me, like, it's not time for you to go on dates yet. I need for you to, like, basically, like, be still. So where I thought I was, because I had all these feelings and emotions, or like for this individual, you know, I'm just like, oh, I could love you. I could love you. I have these feelings. I have these emotions for you. Um, I thought I was doing a good job. I thought I was good. And then God was just like, no, baby, you got some healing to do. And I'm going to show you why. And I remember sending him a text later on that day, like, hey, maybe it's not time for us to go on dates right now. And that was the most rawest thing I ever did, because it's like I flipped in like 2 seconds. It was like God did a turnaround in like 2 seconds. And I think he was just like, whoa, like, wow. Because very seldom are women, like, we seek attention a lot because it's given to us all our lives, right? And when I told him, like, hey, I didn't shift blame. Now, I had sent him like a 10 paragraph text earlier after we didn't go on our date, right? But afterwards, when I had that revelation in the hallway, I was just like, yeah, I don't think it's meant for either one of us to go on dates right now. That was so real and so raw, and that's when I started doing the work on myself. I started hiding. I stopped hiding. I stopped running. I stopped trying to get into relationships to mask the pain. I stopped, forcing myself into people's life, which I'm still learning that. But um it opened my eyes in that moment, and that is when I learned the difference between feelings and vulnerability. That was the moment. And I was like, oh, this is deeper. I got some work to do. So that's how you learn to be vulnerable, is doing the work on yourself and stop running and escaping with these outside sources, just so you won't have to deal with yourself. All right, next thing is know when to be vulnerable. So going back to the example of me competing in pageants, and I didn't want to capitalize off of my pain. Like, I was very aware of how um, my father being on drugs, I was very aware of how that affected my life. And I was also very aware that this could propel me in a way in the pageant industry where it could set me apart from other individuals. But um, I knew that they couldn't handle it, which leads to this point that I wrote down. It says, let me get my notebook out. It says, everyone isn't equipped to withstand the rawness of you. Therefore, you must choose who to be vulnerable with and when to be vulnerable with them. And I knew then that wasn't, going back to the situation with my father, I knew that that wasn't like, yes, this is a good story. Yes, this is heart pulling, heart tugging. Yes, this could set me apart from the other contestants and create create this empathetic sentimental feeling within the audience and the judges. However, I didn't want to use my vulnerability for that, for my um for my successes. And yeah, also too, going back to, look, I'm all over the place now because the phone had ended up cutting off because I had ran out of storage. Don't judge me. Judge your mama. All right. And knowing where and who to be vulnerable with. So, this is something that I'm learning, or that I've learned recently, is that you need safe spaces to be vulnerable. You need safe spaces to be vulnerable, right? And I'm so grateful that I have safe spaces in my life where I can be myself, where I can fully express what I'm feeling, what I'm going through, where certain things stem from. But even with those people that God has graced me with, even they aren't always safe spaces, and not because they aren't capable or not because they aren't good people, but simply because they are people. Simply put, they're human. They can't always uphold the heaviness that I carry. Therefore, God graces us with other people to express these things too. And there is a space where only God can reach, or a space where only you and God are supposed to have those certain conversations, certain intimate conversations. And I'm just realizing that my people aren't always equipped to handle the heaviness, and not just them, vice versa as well. Like, I'm not always in the space to handle their vulnerability well, because we're all going through life's situations. And it's not saying that they're no longer my safe space, or I'm no longer theirs, but it's just the timing of it all. And realizing that, oh, some of this I'm supposed to keep for myself. Like, some of this stuff is for me. A lot of this is mainly for me and God. Or even when I share things with y'all on the podcast, I'm just like, man, should I have said that? And then I'm just like, well, I'm learning. I'm giving myself grace, going back to what I said before about giving myself the grace to learn when and how to do it, you know? And I'm just so grateful that I've realized that now, because I've taken this unrealistic responsibility off of the people that I love, to just always be there all the time, to just take on whatever I have to say about whatever, or whatever I'm feeling. And also taking that unrealistic responsibility off of myself. Like, I'm no one's savior, point blank, period. Like, I'm just not. And not only knowing when to be vulnerable, but allowing yourself to set boundaries for when people always want to be vulnerable with you. I had to come to a certain part of myself to realize, like, my kid, you can't handle that, especially people who refuse to change, or who don't want to change. They just want to talk and express, which is cool. It's just like, that's not your burden to carry. Like, you pray, you discern if this is something that you're supposed to be taking in right now. So that's something that I'm learning as I'm approaching 30. I'm sure you can learn it at any age, but baby, I'm learning it approaching 30. Sometimes God will grace you with the opportunity to be vulnerable with a stranger, but you must discern when. There have been so many moments where I have came across strangers and I found myself opening up to them, and I'm just like, why am I doing this? And it's because God literally instilled a grace on me in that moment to say what I need to say, and they could help me get where I need to get in my mind and my thinking and my emotions. Does not mean, I had to learn this as well, does not mean that this is my constant safe space. It could just mean that this person was graced for this set of emotions at this point in time. This person was graced to me so I could express this and they could help me get where I need to go. It doesn't mean, like I said, that they are my constant safe space, but a moment in time, God will give us. He will give us, he gives us moments of relief in a way that I can't even explain. And he will do that. So be looking for that as well, because it's not always going to be the people that you're like closest to. Sometimes it's a complete stranger who will never tell your business ever. They will take it to the grave. Matter of fact, I'm one of those people, you could tell me your business and I'll forget about it until you bring it back up to me. And they'll be like, you remember when you told me? I'm like, oh girl, I forgot about that, you know? I think that's it. But just remember, anytime you want to create and experience a real, true, genuine, raw experience, that you have to be vulnerable, and you have to discern when to be vulnerable, what to do with your feelings. And so this is how I'm gonna leave y'all with this. This is how you can discern. So pray before you release. Pray before you express. Pray before you just open up to people. Pray about it. Genuinely pray about it. I was listening to the Know For Sure pod again with featuring Jackie Hill Perry, because she was the guest on there. And she was just basically saying that we don't want to depend on God that much, where it's just like, God, should I do this? God, should I talk to this person? God, should I text this man? God, should I blah, blah? Should I open up? Like, it's either we don't want to be that dependable on God, or we just don't know how, or didn't know that we could be that dependable. And I say all that to say, I said all that to say, pray. Simply pray. Like, God, should I be saying this right now? And being a person, I'm a Cancer. I know a lot of y'all don't subscribe to horoscopes or zodiacs or whatever, and I don't neither. It's just something I identify as at certain points in life, but not all the time. But as they say, Cancers are full of emotions, right? And because I feel, and that's like my driving force sometimes, I sometimes jump the gun. So me praying has uh has recently been incorporated into my life, far as like when to be vulnerable, right? Because it's just like, they didn't need to know that, and why did you tell them that? You know, that's something that I'm recently learning. Pray God will. So for people like me, let's just say you didn't have time to pray, like your emotions just got the best of you, you just started expressing. Pray that God will go 10 steps ahead of you for the times you'll release your vulnerability without thinking. So pray he just goes 10 steps ahead of you. There's been so many situations where I'm like, God, all I know right now is what I feel. So I need for you to go 10 steps ahead of me and prepare the way for me, and make sure I don't self-destruct. Make sure I don't, you know, reach a point where I allow the enemy to destroy me. And so that's been a good prayer of mine. Go 10 steps ahead of me. And not me taking advantage of his grace, because I try not to do that. It's not like, oh, God's going to be there for me anyway. It's just when I get to the point where I'm like confused and all bent out of shape, and I'm like worried, and I'm going back and forth in my mind, and I'm overthinking, that's when I'm like, look, I'm just making the best decision I know how to make right now. If I'm making the wrong decision, go 10 steps ahead of me. Yeah, I think that's all. This has been a great episode. This has been, if I'm being completely honest and vulnerable with y'all, this was different because I'm in the living room with a whole different setup, not knowing that the freaking phone was going to cut off, the camera was going to cut off because of storage. I mean, I knew, but I didn't know. I thought we was good. And this has been a real conversation. Even me just sitting here listening to myself, I can't wait to hear what y'all had to say about this episode, your thoughts. Answer the question if you can, or, go to the Glory Throne Academy social media pages and let us know what are your thoughts as far as like the feelings that you have experienced to get to the place of vulnerability, why feelings are necessary. And we're going to end it with this question: to be or not to be? That is the question. So if you're ever thinking about or questioning if you should be vulnerable in a moment, pray. To be or not to be in your feelings. That is the question. Feelings are great. I should have added this earlier, but feelings are great indicators, but they're not great dictators. However, let it be your incubator. Look at me trying to rhyme. Right? Let those feelings lead you to the place in the space where you can meet your purest and rawest, most genuine self. All right, y'all. I'm going to catch y'all for episode, whatever the next episode is. I don't even know the number. I think it's 2019, not sure. But thank y'all so much. Share, like, subscribe, all the things. I love y'all, and I'll catch you for the next episode. Bye.